Generally, your filters screw onto the end of one of your components. We'll talk a little bit about filters. So that's what the imaging chain. When people say the imaging chain, it's the whole, where the light goes through before it gets to your camera sensor. What software do you generally use? The software to help you align your telescope, polar align telescope. Everyone struggles when they first get a telescope with being able to find things and being able to get it to track reasonably well. Because the first thing you've got to do is that middle axis of the telescope's got to be pointed at the south celestial pole. It's all well knowing that your house is at 35 degrees from the ground and south, but trying to get to that within a degree or so is actually quite challenging. Your telescope may have a polar telescope in it, which you can use, or you may need to use software or whatever. There's a few tricks. There's a thing called the pole master, which is a little camera that goes on your mount, which people swear by as a way of finding it. Or you can use a couple of other programs that just allow you to, on your computer screen, make corrections and get your telescope correctly pointed. With telescope control, there's something called Astrophotography, which is just a system for controlling astronomy equipment, which sort of ties them together on your computer. If you're using a Skywatcher mount, there's a program called EQ-Mod, which is a free program which controls every aspect of controlling your telescope mount. That's what I use. That's what pretty much anyone who's using a Skywatcher mount is going to be using to actually directly control the mount. All your other programs then talk to that program, and it does the work on the mount. Something, a Stellarium, for instance, or Carte de Ciel, or everyone has their choice of planetarium software. What it means is you look on your screen and you see the sky, and you can go around and say, oh, there's the Orion Nebula. And you can then press a button and your telescope will try and point to the Orion Nebula. Once you've started doing things that way, you don't want to go back to a handset where you have to select things from a menu. It's pretty much a given, that's how you work. Other telescopes that aren't Skywatcher, most companies have their own software for controlling the mounts. So Meade and Celestron have their own software you can get with your telescope, which you can install, which allows you to control your telescope from a planetarium software, etc. Frame focus and capture, which is what you really want to do, which you get there and take some images. If you've got a Canon camera, there's something called Backyard EOS, which is a small, some guy makes the software, sells it for a few dollars, $30 or something. Lets you fully control your camera. There's something called Nina, which seems to be a bit of a coming thing, which controls all different kinds of cameras and lets you take all your images. You need a program where you can go and say, I want 40 images, 120 seconds long, with this kind of ISO setting on my camera, and just press go and let it sit there and take the images. You don't need to be sitting there taking images by yourself and going insane. So these programs let you do that. There's many alternatives out there. Astrophotography tool has been very popular. You can even use the utility that came with your camera, which is to take images. In fact, depending on how good the individual manufacturer's programs are, it's a good starting point before you start learning all this other software, but you'll soon get frustrated. Yeah. Yeah, you can program.
You program 880, which fits on cameras. It's as good as a computer. I use one. You program it easy. It'll take up to 1,000 pictures.
Yeah. Well, pretty much anything that lets you program a sequence of images is going to allow you to take images. It just depends on how advanced you get and how much control you want. Once you get into stacking your images and enhancing your images, Deep Sky Stacker is a good starting point. PixInsight's more advanced. Again, there are so many programs out there. Maxim is more professional. A lot of people are using dedicated astronomy cameras will end up falling back on Maxim because it does everything. You can control your dome and everything else all within one program. And that's what you use here, and that's what you use out at Cumu for your big telescopes, is Maxim. But you're probably not going to want to be doing that for your home telescope. You don't want to spend more on your software than you spend on your camera. As far as image processing goes, once you've got images at the other end, any decent PC image processing software. Generally Photoshop's the baseline, but of course costs money, not insignificant unless you're a student or something. There's a program called GIMP, which is a Photoshop open source free Photoshop alternative that lots of people use, and there are many others out there. It's really not. And some of these other programs will do quite a bit of processing for you. If you use PixInsight, which does cost money and it's hard to get your hands around, but that will do pretty much the whole processing chain to a much higher standard internally. that's year 3 of your astrophotography adventure, is things like Pixel Insight. What are your main challenges in taking astrophotographs? Finding targets in your camera can be surprisingly easy and can be surprisingly hard. If you can't manage to get the Orion Nebula into your camera lens, then you really are having trouble. It's not particularly difficult because it's so bright. But if you're trying to find a galaxy that is not visible to the naked eye and isn't even visible through the finder scope, then it's a bit more challenging. Getting your telescope set up well enough to automatically point to it is pretty vital. Or you have to fall back on all the old tricks that astronomers use for visual astronomy, which is finding bright, working your way through some nearby stars to find it. The same way you would if you're looking through an eyepiece. You can go, I know it's between these 2 stars here, about halfway, so that kind of thinking. Does work for astronomy, and we all fall back on it when the go-to's not doing quite a good enough job on a really faint object. Stability and tracking is probably the biggest issue. Is getting something where the camera stays pointed at the object without the stars moving through the frame as you go. Because if you're not perfectly polar aligned and you're not tracking smoothly, then your stars will start you'll get to past 60 seconds and you'll start seeing all your stars stretching into streaks in one direction or another. So that's challenging. I'm not going to talk about guiding here because guiding is a little more advanced, but if you get in any way serious about it, you will inevitably go into guiding, which is where you have another camera, usually pointed at the same thing, maybe through a small telescope or through the main telescope, which corrects constantly to keep the image centered. That's kind of phase 2 of astrophotography, and lets you take really long exposure images and therefore see a lot more detail. Focus is always challenging and always fun. Some kind of electric focus is almost essential because you don't have to touch the telescope to focus it. If you have to touch the telescope to turn the focusing knob, guess what? The image goes like that. Almost inevitably. Nothing's that rigid that you can fiddle around with the telescope without wobbling. So it's really hard to get a precise focus if the image on the screen is wobbling about while you're doing it. That said, if you're out there trying to get your first decent image M42, you can probably manage fine with a manual focus. But then you're going to find it frustrating, you're going to want something. So some kind of electric focuser. Again, price ranges from virtually nothing to vast amounts of money for a very high quality temperature compensating focus that'll sit there all night and keep it perfectly focused. Pollution is a challenge. If you live in an urban or suburban area, guess what? You're not going to take long exposure images because all you're going to see is a yellow screen because the light pollution is going to flood out the whole image eventually. Solutions to that are go somewhere that isn't light polluted or use filters of some kind, basically.
Or don't live next to a country that's on fire.
Well, there is, of course, an issue like this at the moment where any astronomy in New Zealand is kind of limited at the moment because the sky's got smoke in it from Australia all the time. You can't see it when you walk outside and look at the sky, but you can damn sure see it when you try and take some images because everything's a little bit fuzzy or a little bit brown. Or processing is it's a hobby in its own right, basically. You can spend forever just trying to process and get better images. Those first images you get off the camera that look okay are actually much better images than you think they are. Those great images you're seeing on the screen from other people, they didn't look like that coming off the camera for the most part. What came off the camera looked nothing like that. They just processed it all really, and that's the end result. So once you learn what processing can do for you, you'd be amazed what you can get out of what look like pretty rogue images initially. Planning is pretty important. There's no point going out there trying to take a picture of M42 in the middle of winter because it's not in the sky. So you need to know what's out there. You've got Stellarium, you've got all these Stellarium type software where you can see what's in the sky at any given moment. There's all the usual resources, magazines and online websites of various kinds that'll tell you. And there's also just getting a hang of what's going to be in the sky at different times of the year. We know it's coming summer here, so we know that our whole eastern sky of Orion and all the things associated with that are all just starting to turn up nice and high in the sky. In winter, there's a different set of objects. The galactic core is up, and that's what's happening. So, learning a little bit about it, planning what kind of thing you want to do. Find out interesting stuff happening when. Guess what? All these deep sky objects that you take pictures of, they look the same as they did 50 years ago to to the point of it making a difference to you and me. Deep sky objects do not change in our timescale, so you don't need to worry about when it's a good time to take a picture of M42 because it always looks the same. That is not true for comets, asteroids, planets, etc. There's also variable stars, which are a whole, again, that's another year of your journey on the whole astronomy thing. It's getting into those kind of things. Comets come up, if there's a real bright comet comes up, everybody wants to take a picture of it, so it's a real worthwhile exercise to do so as well. Seeing that nice green comet appear on your screen is really quite something the first time you do it. Finding Pluto, going out there and taking an image. I mean, I said that dot there, that's Pluto. It's kind of a satisfying thing to do, even though it's just a dot. Altitude doesn't mean how high up a hill you are. What that means is how high is the telescope pointing in the sky when you take the image. The higher the better, to a degree. If you're pointing actually at vertical 90 degrees, you tend to have all kinds of problems with your equipment, because most equipment doesn't really like pointing vertically. But you're up at 60 degrees, 70 degrees above the ground, guess what? It's going through a lot less atmosphere, and there's a lot less heat. You're not going over all those factories 5 miles away and all these things. So you get much better images much more easily at high altitudes. So you want to be taking images up at 50 to 80 degrees for the very, very best chance of taking images. You can take images down as low as you can see things, but the lower it gets, the harder it gets. Later in the night is generally also good. If you can be up at 2 o'clock in the morning imaging, guess what? Best images, because everything's cooled down on the ground, there's less heat haze bubbling up, etc. Multiple sessions. You don't have to take all the images of one object in one session. In fact, nobody ever does. There's people who are taking these great images. They took them over a month. It doesn't matter if you took the image, as long as it's the same overall telescope configuration. You take images on another night, they can all be stacked together. They're all the same data, nothing changes on our timescale. So you can combine images from multiple sessions, combine images from different filters, combine images from different whatever. Generally, you're not combining images from totally different telescopes, but you can for different things. But generally, you combine images from lots of sessions, which is really important to understand. Getting set up, I'm talking about imaging chains, getting your telescope mount set up and polar aligned and stable on its tripod is super important part of the setup. Getting your computer set up and connected and everything working is something you want to do in the daylight a few times, because you don't want to learn how your computer works at 2 o'clock in the morning in the dark in your garden. Well, I did so, and it's very painful. Approximate focus is a very important part of your setup, really. If you can get yourself focused on a really bright object that's easy to find, guess what? When you get to another object, it's focused enough to see it in the screen, and then you've just got the fine focus to do. You're not going to ever, during a session for a night, you're not going to move your telescope away, far enough away from that focus that you don't have to do more than the very fine focus. If your telescope permanently set up in an observatory or something, then it's pretty much staying at focus all the time, and you're just making the minor adjustments. You can, depending on the kind of equipment you've got, you may be able to scribe or mark the actual rough focus point on your focuser. So if you've taken everything apart and you put it back together, and you can literally get it close to focus initially. It helps with finding objects. It's no good trying to find a faint galaxy and then focus your telescope, because it's all donuts and it's too faint to see. Obtaining your targets and previewing things is challenging depending on your equipment, yeah. If your go-to isn't working well enough to find the objects, it can be quite hard to find them. Make sure your finder scope is on and well aligned with your telescope. If you can find a bright object in the middle of your telescope and adjust your finder scope to exactly match it, that's going to be much easier later when you're out there and you pandit something and you're trying to find the object. You can look through the finder scope. If the object's in the centre of the finder scope, it's going to be close to the centre of the telescope. So that's useful. And then you'll be able to see it on your screen using the preview and focus tools. Focusing, there's lots of tricks about those. Most of these programs have tools to help you focus, where you can go in and find a reasonably mid-brightness star, and it'll actually show you in numbers, or as a little spike, how close to focus you are, so it's quite easy to find the adjustments. Guiding will deal with that. It's not really going to do it any further than we already have. Imaging settings for your DSLR. This is real basic stuff, but very important. Using DSLR focusing, raw images only. always set it to take RAW. Do not take JPEG images off your telescope and expect to process them later. You can, but they're already compressed. They're rubbish. Even if they're not compressed, they're heavily compressed.
Sean, isn't it better to take RAW and JPEG because you can quickly preview the JPEGs and tell it's RAW files?
If you're taking them with an intervalometer or something, you probably want to take RAW and JPEG because then you can preview them easily.
Yeah,
if you're taking it through a software on your computer, then the JPEGs are no use. They're just
don't
in
process them, but they're great for preview.
But if you're taking it through a capture program on your computer, the JPEGs are just taken up disk space because you'll never look at them. So yeah, they could be if you were taking them onto a memory card, you might find the JPEG useful for previewing, but generally the only ones you're interested in for your actual images are raw images. All DSLRs that are worth using can take raw images. What that means is an image that hasn't been processed and adjusted into what Canon think to make a nice picture of a tree. Kind of, really, which is what the JPEG is. There's lots of different settings on your camera about what it does to the JPEG, but you don't want it to do anything. You want it to give you what came off the telescope as much as possible. You never get quite out of a DSLR, you never get quite what just came out of the sensor, but raw image is as close as you're getting. ISO. There's an entire subject. We all know on a DSLR, there's the ISO setting. You can go 100 to 6400 or even much higher on modern DSLRs. For a given camera, there's a sort of optimal point to use. It's not ISO 100 for almost any camera, even though most of us think that when we do our thinking initially, we think, well, all those other ISOs are just fake boosting the image, so I should try and do it at that for low noise. In actual fact, depending on your camera, there's lots of answers. For instance, with my 60D, 1600 ISO is probably about a sweet spot for working through the telescope. Other people may disagree. Some of the cameras though, some of the Sonys and stuff that have got different sensors can be used at much higher ISO levels and get the best images out. So it just is something you have to find out. There's plenty of people online will tell you what they think, and usually you just have to figure out which of the three wildly conflicting views is true. And look at what other people are doing, and try it yourself. Go out there and take the same image of M42 at ISO 800 and ISO 6400, see how much noise is on it, but how much more you get. More noise, but more information. So experiment. Exposure times. Two things really, well, three things control exposure times. One is tracking. If your telescope will track to a certain degree, no telescope is ever perfect, no mount is ever perfect. Even with guiding, you can't just go forever. So you're tracking, even with an azimuth mount that's tracked pretty crappy, you're still going to be able to take 30-second, maybe 60-second exposures. So that may be the controlling factor for you, is that you can't take longer than that without seeing lines instead of stars. If you've got it really well set up, the controlling factor may be the sky background. If there's some light pollution, where I am in Bayview on the shore, without a filter, I can't go longer than 300 seconds. If I go longer than 300 seconds, then the background light pollution just means I'm losing too much image and I'm wasting my time. If you're out in the middle of nowhere, you can go much, much longer. Blowouts. What it means is, what are the brightest things in the image? If you're taking M42, that big bright core of the galaxy, you can't take 300-second images anyway, really, because all you're going to see is a big, huge white blob in the middle. Because the middle part of the nebula is so bright, all the sensor wells on your camera are all full. Once you start filling the sensor wells with anything other than the brightest stars, you've got to stop because you're not going to get more information out. You're better off taking more images that's shorter. So for very bright objects, you tend to take lots of short images. For very faint objects, you take lots of long images, as many as you can manage. Filters and mods, you can have your camera modified to pick up more sensitive to the kind of light that comes from the sky. You can, if you're really keen, you can go and take your SLR and some guy will take out the filters internally that block infrared and block some of the stuff that comes from nebula. Or if you're going to get to that point, with the price of astronomy cameras coming down so much now, you might almost be better off going and buying a cool CMOS astronomy camera for the same money. Filters, there's so many different opinions on the subject of light pollution filters. Some people think they're just pointless. Some people find them invaluable. Light pollution filters try and cut out the kind of light that comes from street lights and cars and just generally from around you, while leaving the light in the sky. They do work. Depends on the kind of pollution you've got in your area and what kind of filters you've got. Again, there's some pictures in here about it, but they vary. Narrowband filters is a completely different matter. Narrowband filters cut out all the light. Some of them look black if you hold them up to look through, but they let through one very narrow, specific kind of light. Though some of that nebula in the sky is emitting light in only a couple of very narrow kinds of light, usually hydrogen alpha light, oxygen 3 light, sulfur 2 light, etc. You can get a filter that only lets that through. Guess what? The light pollution goes away because there's none of that light in the light pollution. So you can take a picture with a nice black background of a nebula. The trade-off is that you need longer exposures because you're capturing a lot less light because you're blocking almost all the light out. So it's a trade-off, but you can do a lot with narrowband filters with a DSLR with a home telescope setup and get some really nice images.
What sort of light pollution filter are you using at the moment?
Okay, I have an L Pro filter, which was one that is supposed to be a bit. But I've had a CLS filter, which was okay, reasonably successful, but did cast the colour on the image badly, which was fairly hard to correct. The L Pro filter is less of a colour cast. It's a bit of a trade-off about whether it's worth using or whether you're better off just shortening your exposures to what your sky will let you do and processing it out afterwards. Because you do have, every time you put a filter in, it is removing light from the image. And some of that light is the light from the objects you're looking at. There's no filter that will magically remove light pollution because light pollution contains some of the same colours as what you're looking at. So no filter can do it by magic. I mean, it's kind of, we've had a few talks on filters where people have tried to demonstrate various different kinds. I know some people have got quite strongly held views on the subject. It's easy to start an argument on filters. Very easy. But a decent CLS filter or UHC filter will do a solid job in a suburban setting of letting you take some longer exposures. You just have to learn a few tricks about processing to deal with the fact your images come out looking green or whatever.
Question about narrowband filters on
Yes.
the colour camera.
Yep.
What consequences are there of doing such a thing versus
Right.
using a mono colour camera?
Well, the consequence is that the camera is not nearly as sensitive as a mono camera. So you get less of the light. You basically, if you take a hydrogen alpha image through a colour camera, you get a red image. What that means is only the red cells on the camera are capturing anything. You're not using the blue and green cells at all. So you're using only a third of your camera. And they're not as sensitive. And then those slightly more extreme colour ranges, your home SLR is less sensitive. It's designed to be less sensitive because you want it to take good images of everything normally. But that said, if you're looking at hydrogen alpha specifically, for instance, which is where the red images you see a lot of are, those are actually excellent images through an SLR. You get lots and lots of those. Camera's very sensitive in that range. You get good images. Some narrowband areas, you go into oxygen 3 is pretty decent on an DSLR unmodified. They're green images basically when you haven't done it with them. They are pretty good through a normal SLR. You go to sulfur, the classic trio used by Hubble or whatever is often hydrogen alpha, oxygen 3 and sulfur 2 because those are really big important things coming out of nebula. Sulfur 2, total waste of time on an unmodified SLR. You just don't get it. You can spend all night and you'll see really nothing. If you've got a dedicated camera, even a dedicated one-shot colour camera, it's going to be really sensitive in that area and you can afford to use those filters and get the tricolour image. So for narrowband, the primary narrowband on an unmodified SLR is going to be hydrogen alpha and oxygen 3. So it's going to be the duo. And you can now get filters that let those two through, or even some let another Spanish group called hydrogen beta, which gives you more depth in your images. That filter then works really well with an unmodified SLR because those are all very sensitive in the camera. So there's no real problem with doing it. I mean, I've done some great hydrogen alpha images through the unmodified Canon camera and oxygen 3 images, but hydrogen alpha particularly. What else have we got? Calibration. Most important thing if you're going to do this is figure out about dark images. How to take dark frames. Take dark frames. You don't have to take them every single time you go out there. Your dark frames are based on the temperature you're working at, really. So through the middle of summer, you can take your dark frames and they'll last you a month, very likely, because the temperature's not changing that much. And it's not that precise a business. So you can take a bunch of dark frames and they will give you the biggest improvement to your image for the least work. Once you've got them, you put them into DXI stacker and say, these are the dark frames, and it does the maths of taking them out of your image. And they make a huge difference.
Do they reduce the brightness of the image though?
No, not in any way. They do not. No, they mathematically do not do that, because they only take out the noise from the camera. You've got you're blocking everything else up, and it's just you're just taking a recording of what the camera's doing with no light involved.
I don't want to
Yeah,
get
but
too
when you step them and do that.
You don't stack them in the way of normal images. They're pre-extracted from the images by the stacking software.
I don't want to get too pedantic. But
Yeah.
The dark signal, there's the signal from the dark current, and then there's also a noise. When you do dark subtraction, you're only subtracting the dark signal. There's still residual dark noise. I found with DSLR that I don't even bother with darks.
I found it to be, my experience has been the opposite. If I didn't use dark frames, it looked like absolute cack. So, but again, yeah, fair enough. Everyone has their own experience. For me, dark's super important. It does depend on what kind of camera you've got as well, I suspect.
Well, since I've used the
This is a
Nikon,
60
I
gig.
make the camera.
Pardon?
60 gig.
Oh, really?
I found that if I don't use darks, then I have terrible problems. So,
Did you do that?
Pardon?
Did you do that?
if I don't use dimming, I'm really in trouble. Flat frames are a disaster. I mean,
Since I changed
Anyway.
to Nikon, I've just let the camera do
Ah,
dark frames and frames.
I wouldn't do that.
I compared them,
No, you can-
taking my own dark frames, and the images are brighter and cleaner with the camera doing it. And I don't have to use flat through anything, it's got.
But the problem, but in-camera dark frame subtraction has a huge problem
What's
associated with it. Most cameras have a setting that goes dark frame for long exposures. That's really awesome, but
It wastes time, yeah.
it takes
Yeah,
twice
waste
as
time.
long to take your
I know,
image.
but
Because every image you
the images
take,
are brighter and you
you're
get
taking the
shorter
same
frame.
image again, and it will close the mirror and take the same image.
Well,
and subtracting the same.
We've done a side-by-side test. Me and Robert Patterson did it. And the difference in quality, using virtually the same Nikon camera, the difference was doing dark frame subtraction. I did dark frame subtraction in camera. He did same exposures, everything, but he took dark frames to the standard way. His images, well, he didn't even want to publish them, and
No.
mine currently on the
Oh, so-
internet somewhere.
Maybe Nikon got a really good algorithm in there. I don't know. I've got Canon cameras, so
That's
But
not just my experience.
it may be worth experimenting with the in-camera
I
depth
didn't have
subtraction.
experience
But
with Canon.
I have to say, in comparison to taking twice as many images, which is what you were doing if you don't do that, there's definitely a trade-off there, because it's exactly twice as many
Yeah,
images.
there is that problem.
So, anyway, as you find with any discussion on astrophotography, everyone's got their own experience,
Definitely.
which is what a group like this is for, because people can tell you what they found, and they can give you ideas. Everyone's tried to do what you're trying to do before, and we've all been through. If you were trying to take your first image, guess what? We all took our first image not that long ago, and we've all been through it. Okay, flat frames are also very important, but much harder to get your head around and learn to do. But there's something, again, there are mathematical things in software that will try and substitute for taking flat frames, but again, they're a trick, really. They're not quite the same as taking a genuine flat frame image, because a flat frame image is going, what are the dust, what are the donuts, what are the vignetting, subtract them, what's really happening in the image. So they're really useful. Anyway, so examples of images, these are pretty basic stuff. That's the 1600 ISO 5-minute image, 300 seconds of the lagoon. As you can see, you're getting quite a lot of background. There's quite a lot of sky noise. This is light pollution out here, basically. But you are seeing detail all the way out here. This is a short image of the Orion Nebula, 30 seconds. Okay, it's kind of wide for what you're looking at, but you can't really go much longer than this. You can see in the middle where you're already seeing a bit of a white blown out core. You go any longer, and that's just going to get more and more and more blown out. So the trick then is to refine your process, take lots and lots of images and stack them together, or to take some nice long images to see all, because there's stuff out here, and take some short images and then combine them later as a sort of overlaid, fading one to the other to show the middle and the sides. It's kind of cheating, but a lot of people are doing that. As long as you tell people what you're doing when you publish an image, people don't mind. The only time people get annoyed is if they see images online. It turns out there's all kind of tricks going on and the person's just going, here's an image. This is taken with a CLS filter. As you can see, it all looks a bit green. Most of that can be processed out, but you can't completely recolour the colour. But this image has got a nice dark background, even though it's the same light blue as the sky's the other one. And you can see detail all the way out here. When you process a whole huge stack of these things, you're going to have an image with full nebulosity all the way across the frame. But you've got a contrast. This one here, that's a really bad image of the Helix Nebula, but again, it's a 4 minute image using a CLS filter. Again, you can see it's tinted the colour, but this is a really bad light blue sky. This would actually, there's a stack of these, you can actually extract a decent image. Moving on from that one so much. Your narrowband filters, we're talking about. The one on the left there, hydrogen alpha, Orion hydrogen alpha. Not showing up that one on here, there's a lot better on the other screen actually, but that's taken out everything. You see the background is completely black. What that means is you can get nice long images. You can actually see some of this extended detail here. You take a whole stack of these and you start being able to bring that out and get a really, really good full frame image for everything. This is a nice one actually, really, with the Keyhole Nebula in Carina, done with the Oxygen Tree filter. Again, you've got nebulosity across the whole image and no background, which means that you can keep taking images and keep stacking them, and you're going to get more and more detail out, less and less noise. So those are straight out of the camera. They haven't been really processed. Obviously, they've been stretched a bit by the fact you've taken them off the camera, but you know, they haven't been that much done with them. Yeah. So what are we doing here? Just kind of run through my process. I actually make this whole slide set available to download if people want, or there's plenty of stuff like this online that runs through the process. This is the kind of process what I do of an evening when I'm setting up. Get it all connected, check that your camera is actually set. The dials in your camera are set to manual properly, because how many times you've gone, why is nothing working? I've got my camera set for taking daytime photographs. Point to initial focus star, get a basic focus, set up your imaging in the software, say I want how many frames I want, how long they're going to be, etc. Set up a guide and all that kind of stuff, and then start imaging basically and let it go. Always watch the first image come off the telescope onto the screen before you wander off, because if it's not working right and it's all lines instead of stars, you don't find out 2 hours later that you've just taken a part crap. You want to see that. And check every now and then what's going on with your images. Don't leave it running too long without keeping an eye on it. Your laptop screen emits plenty light to make a difference to your images. So some kind of cover going over that would be good. In my case, having got a set up in the garden, I retired to my house and using my PC inside to remotely look at my laptop, so I don't have to sit out in the cold. And most people do that if they're using it at home, some kind of remote desktop that allows you to do that. Rinse and repeat. So I'm pretty much running out of time here. I've just gone much longer than I intended. There's a capture process for doing calibration. We'll talk about another time. I'll talk about some of this stuff another time. Stacking process. We go in here, see all the images at the bottom. There's all the images. I'm going to go in here, set up all the settings, and it's going to go boom. There's a resulting image where it's combined all the images. There's almost no noise. I haven't used flash properly because it's still got some focus donuts here where there's dust on the telescope. But you can see all this ready to go into your image processing software and be stretched and etc. And then go to Photoshop and very basic stretches and things in Photoshop. That come out of these initial images that look really like that. You can just see a little bit here of what there's nothing much there. But the resulting image of a stack and process was that, which you would be pretty happy with as your first few images off the telescope. So anyway, that's a sort of brief foray into what's involved in astro imaging. Any questions or anything especially?
Look at this, but if you want to get away from the light pollution, the sky has got a dark sky side tumor. I go out during the summer and I'm on my own, it'd be nice to have some.
There is.
And if you've got your telescope set up and programmed to take images, we've got tea making facilities inside and that, so you can sit on the side out of the cold.
And it's an interesting trip to see the observatory at Kimi. There's an observatory at Kimi, belongs to the society, where these guys have got some really good stuff going on, and there's plenty of space outside to set your own telescopes up, and it's quite dark. It's not really, really super dark, but it's pretty dark. It's a lot darker than Auckland.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good, yeah.
Loads of these.
And it's nice and safe because you're inside a fenced area, out of sight of the road. Because going out at night into the middle of nowhere is a slightly worrying thing at times with all this equipment. Especially, yeah, definitely.
It's about 20 minutes driving out of the city, half an hour.
So I haven't really got time to do what else I was going to do, so just basically talk to everybody and get some ideas of what people are looking for from the group next year. We don't have a January meeting,
No.
so February will be kicking off, but I'll try and get a decent program of stuff for next year that's going on. Hopefully some actual activities and sessions of doing stuff together. If anyone's not in the Astrophotography Group Facebook page, and you do use Facebook, go to the Auckland Astronautical Society Facebook page, and there's a link there to the Astrophotography Group where you can say, I want to join, and you say, it'll ask you if you're a member of the society, you say yes, and Jonathan or me or somebody will go, fine, you're in. Everyone posts their images, you can post questions, ideas. If you've got ideas for meetings, post them there.
Maybe in February bring out photos from the sun over the coming month, if we take images.
Yeah,
bring them
definitely.
For the first meeting.
Definitely for the first meeting. Hopefully we'll have an amazing gallery of images from the next 2 months by February, because it's a good imaging season out there, especially for beginners with everything. Orion, Running Man, and all these things up high and bright, really nice objects to take images of. So yeah, good fun. Hopefully summer skies will be enjoyable for everybody out there, not so cold. Not
Except the
quite.
mosquitoes carry you away.
Yeah, mosquitoes are always fun, aren't they? But not so bad with the dew on your telescopes, which is another huge challenge we're meeting in Auckland, is dew in winter, especially. You go out there at night, 10 minutes later, everything's covered in water. So that's a whole different area of handling of that. Of course, there's this I'll put up on the Facebook group to download. There's a whole load of links at the end to things, software and sites to go to look at stuff. And if you've got any questions, people are really helpful. If you post a question on the Facebook group, people who know the stuff are going to come back with answers and help you out for sure. All right, guys. Thank you very much for all coming. It's great to see so many people again. And I'll look forward to seeing you all in February.
Thank you, Sean.
If anyone's going to the planetarium